Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to listen to our presentation on using open access resources to diversify library collections and support bibliodiversity. My name is Kara Forster, and I'm an early career research and learning librarian at Loyola University, Chicago. I'm joined here by my colleagues, Joanna Ball, the Managing Director of the Directory of Open Access Journals, and Emma Malls, Publishing Services Librarian at the University of Minnesota. Today, Emma is going to walk you through a publishing perspective, and Joanna is going to talk to you more about the DOAJ and bibliodiversity in particular. But before we get into that, I'm going to walk you through a perspective on how libraries can promote open access resources and in doing so, attempt to diversify our collections. So for perspective, I work at Loyola University Chicago, which is a mid-sized multi-campus university in the Chicagoland area. We have a Jesuit mission, so as part of that, Loyola's faculty, staff, and students are social justice oriented and do a lot of community partnerships, both through their scholarship and service more broadly. I stress that we collaborate with the community and that we are multi-campus because we have a lot of community partners who do not have access to our traditional databases. And we also have students across campuses with different library licenses. So in particular, I work with our departments of biology, nursing, and public health, and the undergraduates have different sets of resources than the graduate students. This is an ongoing area of development for Loyola. We're actively working to find a solution to this. But in the meantime, it means that open access is a fantastic avenue for us. So I'm going to go into each of these in detail, but there are a few different ways in which Loyola has attempted to promote open access materials. The first is through library instruction. So we do a lot of library instruction in one-on-one sessions, but primarily we do classroom instruction. So this can be within an existing course. Loyola's libraries also go into our college writing seminars that are required of all first-year students. But often the 50 to 70-minute instruction sessions that we are doing are designed to improve information literacy skills for a specific type of research project, whether it is a clinical evaluation, a literature review, a project in which students are required to find seminal research. But the actual databases and tools that the professors want students to use is left very open-ended. So I have used this instruction time as an opportunity to promote open access resources. Not only does this lead to a lot more diversity in the geographical sources that these articles are from, but it also encourages my students to gain lifelong information literacy skills that they'll be able to take after they leave Loyola and no longer have access to our paid databases. Additionally, a lot of these students are going to be going into organizations where they just will not have access to those databases in general. So using this as a time to increase their familiarity with open access resources, both as users and also to encourage them to view these as viable options for publishing in order to get their ideas out there more broadly. We also have our e-commons. So Loyola is a teaching-focused institution, but we have a strong research output. And we highly encourage our Loyola affiliates to submit their articles to our eCommons, which is an open access repository in which we preserve their data sets, conference proceedings, articles, presentations, and other creative works. This is for the benefit of the scholar and the author, as well as the larger community. One great strength about the eCommons, and a reason why Loyola attempts to advocate for it so strongly to our community members, is that because we are a Jesuit institution focused on social justice, diversity, and community, we have a lot of community partners who do not have access to our traditional databases. So publishing in the eCommons allows us to make those papers that they were often co-authors on available to those writers. Open access also outside of the eCommons is important for these community partners as well, as it allows them to be more active participants in the research. We also have our A to Z database list. So this is one of the main ways that we tell students, faculty, and staff to find appropriate databases. There are ways to filter by subject, by resource type. And recently we overhauled the A to Z list in order to update the content descriptions, access policy descriptions, so that it all is more reflective of the current databases. We did not, however, emphasize open access, which I think is a great avenue for promoting this in the future. Currently, there is no filter to do so within Loyola's A to Z list, but a quick search of the term open access revealed that there are only 4 databases labeled as such, which is not reflective of our actual sources, because Loyola has really attempted to collect open access databases and journals more broadly. That point is also reflected in our collection development. So another big avenue for promoting open access resources is through collection development. A lot of our subject specialists and library liaisons work with faculty to select their course materials. And there are a lot of ways in which we can encourage the purchase, adaptation, etc., of open access materials, whether they are textbooks, worksheets, presentations. All of that not only makes the faculty members, students, staff more familiar with these open access resources, but it can also reduce the amount of cost that these departments are using in their library funds. Additionally, by promoting these open access journals, we have been able to make some agreements within our e-resource and collection department in order to get some APCs covered. So we have been able to give APCs to various disciplinary faculty across the board. We were a little bit worried that all of our credits would be taken by our hospital staff, in particular our residents, but we have found that it has been pretty equitably dispersed across the life sciences, humanities, and social sciences. So we're very excited about that. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Emma.
Hello, as introduced, my name is Emma Moles. I'm a publishing librarian with the University of Minnesota Libraries, and I'm going to talk today about library publishing programs, specifically and where they fit into this larger conversation of DOAJ. So library publishing programs, as a brief overview, Library publishing programs tend to share a lot of attributes. There are certainly programs that differ from these sort of generalized features. But what I'm going to share is information that we know to be true based on organizations like the Library Publishing Coalition, who really does a scan of library publishing programs every year. These are also all true of my publishing program at the University of Minnesota. So if these are not true of all, they are certainly true of the context in which I work. So library publishing programs are really just one piece of what is often an array or suite of services that the library is offering to support open access on campus. So by this, I mean a library publishing program might exist as well as an APC fund for authors, as well as read and publish deals that the library has signed into. A library publishing program is really just one piece of a larger suite that libraries are offering. By the name, library publishing programs are housed within the library. They're run and staffed by librarians. This is certainly a unique attribute of library publishing programs. And because librarians are often sharing many duties across different services within the library, a publishing program might be run by a scholarly communication librarian, by an open education librarian, by a repository manager. So there's a lot of shared skills that are being used in order to run a publishing program. Library publishing tends to use open source infrastructure. This is not always the case, but it tends to be true. So one of the most used journal publishing platforms is OJS, Open Journal Systems. This is open source infrastructure. I think one of the reasons why we see a real investment in open source infrastructure within library publishing programs is, one, the cost. I think running something like ScholarOne is incredibly expensive, and it's just because library publishing programs are not revenue generating, there's just no way to afford a platform like this. Another reason is that we've seen, as open source publishing infrastructure has become more available or has diversified, so have library publishing programs. So we can kind of map the rise of publishing programs to really be step in step with open source infrastructure. Publishing programs are often an extension of other services in the library, like digital collections and repository services. So again, like I said, sharing a lot of this expertise within the program. Publishing programs often complement university presses. So not every university where there is a library publishing program has a university press. So in some cases, the library publishing program is the only formal publisher on campus. In other cases, like at my own university, the university press is very lively and robust, but their programs are very different from ours. So whereas they are focused largely on monographs, largely on the humanities and social sciences, our publishing program serves a different need on campus. We are primarily focused on journals. We have a lot more STEM titles. So we certainly are not at odds with one another, and we're very different services that offer a different, we fulfill different needs on campus. Library publishing programs can also be funded in part by collection dollars. So this is true of my library. We have a large pool of money that is the collections budget. Most of this, as has always been the case, is spent on subscriptions to closed access or hybrid journals, and a tiny sliver of that larger collections budget is set aside for library publishing. So anything that we spend within library publishing comes directly out of the collection budget, which means if the library publishing program did not exist or cease to exist, those dollars would get reabsorbed by the larger collection budget and would likely be spent again on subscription content. So we are really helping to direct our budget to support more open access content and infrastructure by having a library publishing program. Library publishers publish a variety of content, textbooks, monographs, but I want to talk specifically about journals. Journals published by libraries tend to be open access. In fact, most of them are open access. we see a fairly we have a commonality across some of our journals in that the journals are cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary. I think part of this is because we know that cross-disciplinary and interdisciplinary journals haven't often had a home in the past. So these are a lot of proposals that I get in my publishing program is to start a new cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary journal. Most of the journals have Creative Commons license on them. So this is, again, sort of in step with the open access-ness of the journals. The journals also tend to have some type of pre-existing relationship on campus. So this can be that the editors or founder of the journal is a faculty member on campus or was a faculty member on campus. It can also be that the society that owns the journal has some pre-existing relationship with the university or with the library. I think part of this is just that's how the society or the journal knew that the library was publishing, is that there was this pre-existing relationship. The journals are primarily run without APCs. This is just not within the business model of most library publishers. I think in part because we have funding coming from the collection budget and because we have a staffing model in which the library publishing staff are not dependent on journal revenue, right? So they are employees no matter how much money is coming in through the journal publishing program or the publishing program. So we don't run on article processing charges. We don't need to make up money in order to pay for our services. We have other ways of doing that. So APCs are just generally not within the business model of a library publisher. Library publishers also publish newly developed journals, flipped journals, early open access journals that were online in the early days of the web. So it's really a fairly diverse collection that each library publisher can have. Shifting to think about DOAJ, DOAJ is probably one of the biggest points of distribution for library published journals. It's recognized by electronic resources librarians and discovery layers. So it's a trusted source. It's already there. It's integrated within the library's search tool. So library published journal articles are served up in the same place that longstanding closed access journal from a commercial publisher is. DOAJ is also an article index and a journal directory, and I think that's really important to understand. So not only is it a way to distribute articles to readers, it's also a way to attract authors to the journal. So DOAJ can be a tool where people can go to look for an open access journal that they want to publish in. So I think this dual purpose of DOAJ is incredibly important, and it's really a valuable tool because of that. DOAJ finally is in alignment with a lot of the values that the journal and publisher shares. So my journals are open access for a reason. They're not open access just because that's the infrastructure that we have. There are journals that want to be open access. There are journals that want international readers and international authors. So there's a lot of shared value between the journal, but also between the publisher as a library and directory of open access journals. So where there might be conflict with other article index databases over how that content is shared, what terms are within the contracts that when a journal deposits, DOAJ is a much easier partner in that because our values are already aligned. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Joanna.
Thank you, Emma. And I'm going to complete this trio of presentations by talking about how the Directory of Open Access Journals supports both the discovery of smaller journals like Emma's, as well as libraries like Kara's, in making a more diverse range of content available to their users. First of all, I'm going to start with a little bit about the Directory of Open Access Journals. We are a unique and extensive index of diverse peer-reviewed open access journals, but our organization has a wider mission to raise the profile and visibility and impact of all open access journals. And that's regardless of what discipline they cover, their geography, or the language in which they publish. All of the journals that apply to be indexed within the DOAJ go through a thorough manual reviewing process where they're matched against our criteria. And for that reason, our criteria and our database has been seen as an unofficial gold standard for open access journal publishing and is trusted across the scholarly community by librarians and publishers alike as a source for trusted open access journals. And all of our services and metadata that we provide are free of charge. Here is our homepage captured a couple of weeks ago, and you can see now that we now have 18,000 journals listed within the directory, over 12,000 of which do not charge an APC. You can also see the diversity of the content that we have within the DOAJ in terms of the number of languages, 80 languages represented, and also 130 countries represented. A little bit more about the geographic diversity within DOAJ listed open access journals. And we've divided here our journals very crudely in terms of Global North and Global South. You can see, as you might expect, that we have very strong representation from the US, from the UK and other European countries, but we also have really strong representation from countries such as Indonesia and areas such as Latin America. Language diversity is something which is really important to us within DOAJ, and that does set us apart from some of the commercial databases. So one of our aims is to raise the profile of open access journals in languages other than English. So we provide discoverability for them, and our criteria are also written in an informal, simple language, and we make important documents available in different languages to enable researchers, publishers, journal editors whose first language isn't English to be able to make sense of our services. We're also a signatory of the Helsinki Initiative on Multilingualism, which is all about promoting the use of local languages in research. We also support journals that have limited resources in a number of ways. Firstly, we don't mandate the use of DOIs for journals to be included in DOAJ. The DOIs are challenging for some institutions. They cost money. Not everybody can afford them. So this is a way of ensuring that journals with limited resources can still make their way into the directory. We also provide visibility to newer journals. Journals only need to have been running for a year before they're eligible to apply. The same goes for student journals. We also accept student journals, unlike many of the commercial databases. Our metadata is integrated with library discovery systems, so that means that we give users access to a much more diverse range of content. We're also looking at other ways to support journals that are more vulnerable. For example, through the Jasper project, which is an initiative which we're running with a number of other organizations to look at the long-term preservation of DOAJ listed diamond open access journals. Research has shown that many journals are at risk of completely disappearing from the internet. So this project is working on pairing vulnerable publishers with preservation services so that we can ensure that the research and that the articles are kept for posterity. DOAJ as a service is business model agnostic, but we do recognize that there's an extra support required for institutional publishers who are using the diamond model for publishing their journals. And for that reason, we have endorsed the action plan for Diamond OA, which was launched earlier this year by a number of European funders. It is about ensuring a sustainable, community-driven Diamond OA scholarly communication ecosystem. There's an action plan community that has been built up around the plan. And this has been endorsed by an international community now, including several US organizations. And perhaps at the heart of the action plan is a New Horizon Europe project, developing institutional open access publishing models to advance scholarly communication, which is all about improving efficiency, quality standards, capacity and sustainability for institutional publishers within Europe in the first instance, but we're very much hoping that this piece of work will stretch out and have an impact internationally. We're also running a number of other initiatives to increase our diversity of coverage within the Directory of Open Access Journals. Back in 2019, we published an open letter to encourage groups within the social sciences, humanities and arts to identify journals which should be indexed in DOAJ but weren't already. Following on from this, we then started a project with the Federation of Finnish Learned Societies to get more Finnish journals into the directory. This is working, this has been successful, and we've used that model for projects in other countries, and we're working on a project now in Denmark and also working with several organizations in China to increase the number of Chinese journals within the directory. There are also a number of other projects that we're working on, particularly in Africa, where we know there's an awful lot of publishing activity, and there are a number of journals, a lot of journals that aren't yet in DOAJ. We're running awareness and training around open access and the importance of indexing within DOAJ in Africa. We have a partnership with the African Continental Open Access Platform, and we're currently working to get 12 of their journals into the directory. And we also run webinars, for example, the African webinar series back earlier this year, where we spoke with journal editors and publishers within Africa around issues such as copyright and licensing, how to run a journal, how to be indexed in the Directory of Open Access Journals. So it's all about raising awareness of open access and the importance of journal standards. So I just wanted to finish with this last slide, which really sums up what we've been talking about today. So it's all about improving or increasing the variety and the diversity of the journals coming into a service like DOAJ, and then using that kind of pipeline from DOAJ into library discovery systems, services and advice to ensure that library users have access to a much more diverse range of content and a diverse range of voices when they are using materials and when they're conducting their research. Thank you very much for listening. Here are all of our email addresses, and we're looking forward to answering your questions and to further discussion now.